Alright, so today I want to talk about the bitrate and codec settings that you can get inside of the A6700 camera that I recently bought. So it's probably going to be a bit of a nerdy video with numbers and jargon being thrown about, so fair warning. So when I first got this camera, naturally one of my first questions is what quality settings I want to use when shooting most of my footage. So in order to decide, I ran a few tests to help me, and I figured that the results of those tests are probably going to be of some general interest, so I'm sharing the results in this video. If you want to skip straight to the comparison tests themselves, you can go to this timestamp. If not, you can kind of just stick around, listen to me give an overview of all the options available, and also explain how I narrowed it down to those few settings that I actually tested in the comparison tests. So if you're shooting video on this camera, you will quickly realize that you have quite a few codec options to choose from. For example, if you shoot 4K 60, you will find that you have these three codecs to choose from. Now for me personally, my main concern is to get as much quality as I can with as little disk space as I can get away with. So quality to storage efficiency is my main judging criteria here. So right off the bat, I'm going to eliminate the last option, and without getting too far into the weeds here, the last option is the intra codec, and what that does is that it encodes video information for every single frame, and what that results in is very large file sizes because you're encoding every frame, but it's also the best quality that you can get. It's very easy to decode. But personally, I'm not interested in getting monstrously large video files for very marginal improvement in quality, so that option goes. So what remains is the XAVC S and XAVC HS options, which is apparently just Sony's pick for the H.264 and H.265 codecs. So again, without getting too far into the weeds, the H.264 codec is a pretty old codec. It has very widespread support, it has some very good encoders and decoders written for it. XAVC HS or H.265 is a newer codec that improves support H.264 by being more efficient in storing video data. So what that means is that the same amount of disk space is going to store more video data in H.265 than in H.264, with the cost that H.265 has less widespread support and also requires a little bit more computing power to decode. Again, for me, because my main objective is to get as much quality with as little disk space as possible, my choice here is going to be H.265. But having selected H.265, you may be dismayed to realize that we still have 5 different settings to choose from under H.265. So for example, if you're shooting 4K 60, you will have these possible settings. So taking a closer look at these settings, you will notice that some of them are 10-bit 422, some of them are 10-bit 420, and this is the difference in color depth information stored, with 10-bit 422 storing more color depth information, which makes it easier and better for color grading. So with this information in mind, we can probably pair up the top 2 options and the middle 2 options here as being of pretty similar quality, with the color depth information chiefly accounting for the difference in bit rates here. That kind of narrows us down to 3 quality settings roughly. So these are what we are going to test in the comparison tests. Okay, so to recap, the settings that I'm going to be testing in these comparisons are 4K 60, XAVC HS, 10-bit 422, 200 megabits per second, 10-bit 422, 100 megabits per second, and 10-bit 420, 45 megabits per second. Let's get to it. Alright, so you are now looking at footage that is 45 megabits per second, 10-bit 420. So how do I look? I'm going to move around a bit. And now we are up to 100 megabits per second, 10-bit 422. So how do I look? And finally now, we are at the top quality setting, 200 megabits per second, 10-bit 422. How does it look? Okay, so looking over the footage, I think you would agree with me that they are pretty much indistinguishable. And that's not a particularly surprising result because this is probably not a very challenging scene. It's mostly a static scene with the main thing that's moving in the scene being me. So I think even the low bitrate setting did a pretty good job here. So next we're going to try a somewhat more challenging scenario. I'm going to do a panning shot over a scene that has, some details in it, so that it's going to be, moving across the screen. There's going to be a lot more movement. And yeah, let's take a look at the results. Okay, so looking at the footage here, I think they still perform really, really close. Even slowing down the footage and punching in 2 times, at least personally, I don't feel like I can confidently say that the low bitrate footage is clearly worse, or even noticeably worse than the other 2 settings. So this is a little bit surprising to me, and I think this is showing that the 45 megabits per second setting is actually performing really, really well here. So for final test, I want to try to do something that is really, really challenging. What I did was I pointed the camera down at a rough, gravelly road and kind of just walked across it and dragged the shot across so that, all of the pebbles and stones is gonna just be rushing across the screen. And to make it harder, I will also shoot this in a high shutter speed to force the camera to kind of render most of the details and not be able to hide the details inside of motion blur. Yeah, let's take a look at the results of that. Okay, so here, I think just looking at the footage by themselves, they still look very comparable, and even the low bitrate setting still does not fall apart in any really obvious way. But here, I think if you were to punch in and slow down the footage, the 45 megabits per second footage starts to really visibly fall apart now. You can actually see it kind of just breaking at the seams. So finally, I think we are able to distinguish this low bitrate setting. Now, the remaining 2 settings are still very similar by my likes, and I don't feel confident in saying that I can clearly see a difference. I do feel like the 200 megabit per second footage renders the details a little bit better, but I'm not even sure if that's just placebo. They are very close. Okay, so what have we learned? Well, I think what the results show is that even the low bitrate 45 megabits per second setting is pretty capable in this camera. And you can probably get away with shooting in that setting for the majority of video work that you want to do. Personally, myself, I think I will be sticking with the 100 megabits per second setting just to be safe. I don't see a reason why I would need to shoot at the 200 megabits per second setting given these results. I've also gone ahead and shot a vlog in the 100 megabits per second setting now. If you're interested in seeing how that looks like, links in the description. I think it looks great, so I'm gonna stick with this setting for the time being. If I ever change my mind, I will pin the comments down below explaining why. But yeah, for the time being, this is it. Hope that was useful and interesting. Maybe help you make a decision on how you want to shoot your own videos. And yeah, thanks very much for watching.